What is shocking art?
I don't know. One thing I was thinking about is whether art that is considered shocking throughout history was intended to be shocking, whether or not the artist was trying to be provocative.
Like, for example?
For example, Botticelli's Birth of Venus was considered shocking. Was Botticelli really trying to provoke that kind of reaction? Or was it more of a mistake in terms of how people read the work?
Every time I think of Botticelli's Birth of Venus, I always think of Carl from The Simpsons being naked, or is it Lenny, asking Homer, "But you never seen a naked man riding a clam before?" So I think now that defines that the Venus is not shocking in
at
current
all.
day.
At all. A lot of the things that we consider shocking, we're looking back at a historic period that we're not a part of right now. But we could look at some contemporary examples like Maurizio Cattelan and the banana that we talked about last week. Comedian from 2019.
Is the banana shocking? Can you be shocked? Is that so appalling to see a banana in duct tape? I don't get surprised by duct tape, and I see bananas in the grocery store. What about combination of bananas, a white cube, and duct tape is shocking?
Depends on who you're asking. To me, or to you, or to someone else. I think what was shocking about Cattelan's Comedian was the sheer audacity of it. The fuck you nature of sticking up a banana and calling it worthwhile and saying it's worth a lot of money. And that's the thing. Cattelan is provoking on purpose. And the real question is, did it work? Who gets shocked by it? A lot of artists were really angry about it because it felt like a jab towards the profession.
Is it the shock at the audacity of Cattelan or the credulity of the art fair and the people that spent all the money on it?
All of it. All of it. It seems to wrap up into a nice, neat package of what's wrong with wealth inequality in America. Some elites are playing this tongue-in-cheek game that only they get to play and supporting artists who would be so audacious as to even try this.
Is it any different than Duchamp's fountain?
No.
Because Duchamp's fountain seems like this big renegade stunt, but Duchamp was actually on the board of that art show in New York. And that art show was supposed to accept any submission as long as it had an entry form and $6, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
He was on the board. And then when somebody else submitted the fountain under R. Mutt anonymously, Duchamp resigned from the board because the board did not want to accept it. But then somehow the press found out about this resignation, and then it was all publicity. So it almost seems like the exact same thing, sans the social media and the fruit.
Well, that's what's interesting is that both of these artists were attempting to point out some sort of corruption in the art world. They seem to be both an attempt to dismantle certain art institutions, including things that keep people out and institutions that are elite and exclusive. But now I don't know of an art history textbook that doesn't include Fountain. So it has become part of the canon, which essentially means that it's a part of the institution that it started out critiquing.
Both of them have uncanny similarities. For example, they're both found objects. They're both ready-mades. Ready-mades was coined by Duchamp in English in a letter written in French to his sister. It's written right there in the middle of the letter. It's fascinating to look at because we always use this word. It had to be written the first time. Somebody had to take a banana with duct tape the first time. That banana is now gone. Yet we're probably going to be talking about this. Even by nature of us talking about it now, it will become part of the canon. And then so we'll see art history books with the fountain next to the banana, probably forever now.
Yeah.
So is it automatically unshocking since it's just going to be so banal? And
it's a really good question. I didn't find anything all that fantastical about the banana. I thought it was a prank, and I took it for what it was. To me, it kind of loses any shocking ability the minute that you internalize it and say, okay, cool, there's a banana, and there, like you said, there's a duct tape store down the road. But if it really strikes a nerve, that's where it really gets at people.
The more I learned about Fountain, the less I was excited about it. I still like the piece, but I used to really like it. When I found out Duchamp was on the board of the exhibition, it seemed like, oh, you're already playing inside baseball. You already are one of the players. So it seemed less risque. Whereas if it was just somebody submitting Fountain because, hey, you all make paintings, I got this urinal. That seemed pretty cool. I used to always say that one of my favorite works of Duchamp was the one where he coined the term ready-mades in that letter. Hey, put my name on this. That's now a sculpture. That conceptual thought is pretty profound, whether or not it's valuable beyond, okay, now we have that, now we can think other ways. Similar to the way once we have explanations for weather phenomenon, we can discard religion. Once we have ways of thinking about art in other contexts, we can discard preconceptions and rules for making. It doesn't mean we always have to make urinals and spoiled fruit with tape, but it potentially expands our thinking and modes of making, even if they may not have so much inherent value in themselves.
One of the most shocking pieces of art that I've ever encountered was an artwork by Matthew Barney at a Houdini exhibition at the Jewish Museum in 2011. What was shocking about it was simply that there were live birds kept captive inside this installation. I was shocked that in this day and age, anyone would think that you should keep captive animals for your artwork. I just find that kind of abhorrent.
Yeah, especially when you go to, zoos, it's really cool to see the animals, but then you're like, a zoo is almost more shocking than an art gallery.
Yeah. Oh, you know what?
I got to tell you, the most shocking thing I found about art is every time I go to an art gallery and it's free. That shocks me. Art galleries got to start charging more money.
That also brings me to dogs that can't touch each other. It was a video of this installation of pit bulls that were trained to fight, and they were put on treadmills, and they were about 6 or 7 inches away from one another. So they were just running at one another constantly with their mouths foaming, and it caused this whole controversy. There are people there kind of egging the dogs on, and everything about it just has this milieu of animal abuse. Those things are intended to shock, but also they're surprising.
I think that really shows that, just like all things, shocking can really be on an entire spectrum. Just because it's shocking doesn't need to be good. And just because something isn't shocking doesn't mean it's bad. There are certain things that will forever remain shocking, likely, and they don't necessarily need to be in art.
Yeah. So this is Sun Yun and Peng Yu in 2003. It was by these 2 Chinese artists, dogs that cannot touch each other.
I wonder if there's some cultural context we're missing.
Absolutely. Yeah, I've done a deep dive into these artists, and they use live animals quite often in their work. One time they had this whole mesh hanging from the ceiling with all these sea creatures that were skewered and still alive, like frogs and crustaceans that were just kind of squirming. There is a lot of commentary about how Chinese culture treats animals embedded within the work.
Yeah, I think just from personal experience in Japanese cuisine, there's sometimes a desire to have seafood so fresh that it's killed and still squirming and wiggling on the table when it's served to you. And it's fascinating, but just because something might have been acceptable at one time or even shocking at one time, sensibilities can change and shift with the zeitgeist. There's plenty of examples throughout history of things that we don't do now. Are there other examples?
There are quite a few. With Botticelli's Birth of Venus, it was more a contextual and cultural shock in terms of elevating pagan deities in a time that's highly charged with Christianity, not the naked person. But it does seem that nudity is one of the most consistent themes, at least in the Renaissance and Baroque periods, of things that shocked. Look at Donatello's David. The fact that it had this young naked boy with erotic overtones kind of read as scandalous. You have Manet's Olympia, where there was a sort of scandal around the fact that there is this nude body, but also staring and confronting the viewer.
It is fascinating that so much of the Western art history is related to religious iconography, and therefore we have to have this prudish take on it. It's kind of funny because you think of Theodora, the wife of Justinius in the Byzantine art. This is the one in the green with all the gold all over, presented as this saintly figure. But apparently she was quite the player.
Oh, she was. She was awesome.
And had, concubines and an entire court, yet she is depicted as a pious figure. But everyone knows that. When I look at the painting, I don't think about that. But then if you read about it, you're like, oh, wow, this is totally untrue. It's like the opposite of the nudity or the opposite of Michelangelo filleting the Pope in the Judgment Day in the Sistine Chapel.
One note about Theodora, not only did she have a wild life, but she had a wild upbringing. And her father was a bear trainer in the Hippodrome. He would do live shows with bears. And she grew up in that milieu where she was a performer as well, which was really shocking for her to ascend to the throne as wife of Justinian. But it ended up being such a good move. She supports him throughout his career and in some ways became the force behind his politics.
That's funny that you said hippodrome. That must be a type of theater because there used to be a hippodrome theater down on Euclid Avenue in Cleveland, not far from here. It became a parking garage, and the Cleveland Urban Design Collaborative, part of Kent State University, a while back did a project called the Hip Deck, where they tried to recreate the festivities on the top level, the top deck of the parking garage.
Oh, that's wild. Yeah, that's cool. I guess hippodrome comes from the word for horse and course. It's a horse course. It's a track for racing horses. Do you remember Ben-Hur when they're riding their chariots around? I think that was a good example of a hippodrome.
Maybe I would love to. We should do a deep dive on that sometime. The Hippodrome in Cleveland. Maybe it was a place of horse racing and
a horse course.
A horse course. What about works like Chris Burden, where he's locking himself in a locker, having someone shoot a gun at his arm, crawling through broken glass? Those seem intended to shock.
Certainly. Or Vito Acconci masturbating under the floor in the gallery. They seem very much aimed at shocking. I wonder if Burden is creating his own conceptual version of testing the limits of what art is, and not just in a way that's meant to be provocative to the market, but also to himself and his peers. A lot of these artists, particularly in circles like Burden's, were making work for their peers and for a dialogue and discourse between their artworks. And in some ways, it seems like a different case than the banana.
It's fascinating because Burden used firearms in his work, but then later had a student who did a performance, had a gun in the performance, which appeared real. The student claimed it wasn't real, then walked out of the room, and everyone's already kind of on edge, as understandably so. And then there is a fired gunshot sound. The student claims it was a blank, and Chris Burden was very upset about this. And I think rightly so. And it was interesting, suddenly the shocking tables were turned on the former shocking artist. If you're being shocked, it depends on who's doing the shocking. If you're trying to be provocative, then maybe it seems okay. But then if you're shocked by something, is it a different reaction? Like the difference between the artists that are upset at Comedian and the banana versus Catlin that's actually just putting a banana on the wall.
Yeah, I guess it depends on control and who has control in that situation. Everything about Burden being shot in the arm was very much something that he had planned out and worked out with his team. Whereas when someone walks in the room with a gun and claims it's art, you have no control in that situation. So now you're not sure if you're in an art piece or like a hostage situation.
Yeah, I guess if the person said, come to this performance where I fake suicide, and you could voluntarily go rather than be a captive to such an event, would change the calculus there.
We could talk about Gustave Courbet's The Origin of the World, anatomically explicit depiction of female genitalia, hidden for decades, considered to be an affront to humankind. And actually, this is one of the weird things that I was wondering about. We've been talking about whether or not shock wears off. I was able to see this at the Met just by chance. I was walking through and saw that it was on display, but it was on display behind a wall that had like basically a warning, right? It gave you a little heads up that what you're going to see contained explicit nudity. And you never see that in other paintings in museums. This somehow is set apart because of the viewpoint. And it is a close-up of a woman's genitalia. I remember standing outside the wall and watching people go in and listening to their reactions.
That is interesting, that the context and the perceptions are different. It's kind of like getting warned ahead of a jump scare. It's a lot less shocking then.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe it sets up people to be more upset. When there was a lot of right-wing outrage over certain artworks, people hadn't even seen it. But
yes.
Descriptions of the artworks became something other than the artwork themselves.
Yeah, I wanted to mention that. So in particular, I'm thinking about Chris O'Feely's work in the Sensation exhibition. And I don't think there would have been nearly as much attention paid to it were it not for some outrageous politicians who, again, haven't even seen the work, namely Rudy Giuliani, trying to defund arts in the city because of this. And so in some ways, shock comes as an accrual of cultural detritus, being in the wrong place at the wrong time.
I remember the first time I saw the O'Feely piece, and I was like, this is what all the fuss is about?
I know, right? Yeah.
It's kind of just a painting on round balls that happen to be elephant dung. It's no different than some of the uber macho paintings that put their paintings on cinder blocks to show how tough they are. It just seemed almost like a parody more than anything else.
Right. Yeah, and if you were to look closely at Ophelia's work, you'd probably be more offended by the small cutouts of pornographic imagery, but you got to get there first. But instead, everyone was mad about the dung. Yeah.
That's it's amazing. We were talking earlier about going back and actually reading court documents and seeing the verbatim text that AI models take. That's another example. If you read the congressional testimony, they're talking about elephant dung flung all over a painting, but there's a bunch of crotch shots that are cut out like butterflies
Right.
all over
Right,
it.
right.
It's actually pretty great collage.
Yeah, yeah, totally. So there are examples throughout history, but I don't know. What would you say is maybe one of the most shocking things that has sustained itself?
Yeah, it's shocking. That is a great question. I'm interested in the distinction you made earlier about whether something is shocking or was intended to be shocking.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes when you intend to be shocking, you can almost not be so shocking. For example,
Yeah.
continuing to talk about Duchamp's ready-mades, they were lost, then remade and exhibited as these art objects. And an artist, Pier Pinocelli, walked into a museum and smashed one with a hammer, saying that he was fixing the art because it wasn't real art because the ready-made was gone and this was a reproduction.
Yeah.
And then when he was sued and taken to court by the government, he said, I've made this one more valuable. This is a work of art.
Yeah.
And it was intended to be shocking, but it's kind of lost in the clutter of the actual original work.
Yeah, and in a way, that spectacle becomes part of the work, right? So everything about, it seems, the idea of the ready-made is rooted in a kind of narrative that's built up around it. What life this object inhabited before it was turned into an artwork. And so the same thing with when some guy took Catalan's Comedian off the wall in the middle of the art fair and was just like, well, I'm just doing the thing that the artist wanted. It becomes a part of that story. And so in some ways, it's more fascinating than the artwork itself.
That same artist later in a protest cut off part of his pinky. It seems like a big, shocking event, but then you just have a little bit less pinky and it's kind of forgotten.
In terms of what is still shocking, I don't think there's much. Something like Goya's black paintings, which he kept to himself, maintain a certain, I think he was afraid of putting the imagery out. I think he had at that point really resigned to working in the dark, if you will, and that was why he purposely created these on plaster in his house so that, you know, they were not canvases that you could just take out and display. But I think that's also an example of a kind of a change of position. One of the most fascinating things, Botticelli later in life became very pious under the reign of a new leader, and he wanted to burn all his paintings. And it was only through a wealthy benefactor that stored all of the paintings that he had bought of Botticelli's and put them in like another house to keep them away from Botticelli and other crazy people who were participating in this bonfire of the vanities and burning all of these things that they had once revered, which is fascinating to me. I can't imagine pivoting that much in your life that you are ready to burn basically who you were before, but it happens.
I also think that what is shocking changes. I can't remember the symphony that made people apparently run out of the theater.
Oh, Rite of Spring?
Could be.
Yeah.
And it was so dissonant sounding that you hear it now and you're like, yeah, that sounds like a movie. But it made people run in terror. When Henry Moore's sculptures were made, or when Duchamp and Picasso were making new paintings that did not fit the representational paradigm of the day, they were probably pretty shocking. And in fact, people even for a long time used examples like that to show how shocking art was. If you remember the movie Beetlejuice, the mother in the movie was a sculptor and made these weird abstract sculptures that came alive. And they're supposed to be shocking, like, oh, look how dumb art is. But those things are all over hotels and art galleries everywhere. I bet you most people, conservative and liberal, would love to have a Henry Moore sculpture or something abstract like that in their home. And they would think, this is amazing. Yet 70, 80 years ago, that would have been semi-shocking and scandalous. And it was even to the point that it was a parody that was made. And then later in The Big Lebowski, what was supposed to be shocking, I believe it was an ode to Yves Klein, because we have the woman who's swinging on the bungee cord with paintbrushes and screaming and smashing the canvas. So Yves Klein used to paint nude women blue, kind of chauvinistic and predatory, but then would have them be the paintbrushes.
Right.
Wow, so shocking, so amazing. But now it's just a parody in a movie, and I don't think it would be that shocking now.
Yeah.
just a night at the club. Have you ever made any shocking art?
I don't think so.
You ever tried to be shocking?
Maybe in like small drawings in my sketchbook.
It seems semi-juvenile. It seems to be a necessary urge occasionally to be shocking and to push at a thing,
Yeah.
but without the extra intellect or the extra meaning or thought or context, it's kind of impotent.
It is, but I think it holds a place. I have to be honest with you. I really enjoyed watching artists freak out about Catalan's banana because I thought it was just so silly of a thing in amongst all the things that are happening in the world right now to be upset about. For people to be upset about basically what was an artist just being irreverent and being pretty juvenile seemed kind of hilarious. It seemed to be missing the point, that's for sure.
I think so. I think we should definitely try to sell some bananas and duct tape.
Let's do it.
Limited time sale.
Yeah.
I think the next time I see an art fair, maybe we can just make a booth and we sell fruit with duct tape on it.
Should the first 5 people who respond to this video requesting a banana, we send them one?
I think so. And it'd be in the mail and open at your own risk.
Yeah. And it's duct taped already.
On the inside and the outside. Thank you, Tony. I do have one correction to make.
Yeah.
Just a second. In the previous episode about AI and copyright, I mistakenly referred to Lynn Goldsmith's photo of Prince that Andy Warhol painted as Nan Goldin's photo. It's actually kind of funny. There's an in both first name and a gold in both first names, but it is definitely Lynn Goldsmith, the rock and roll photographer who photographed Prince and won the copyright lawsuit. Boom, Tony.
Sweet. I might have said that Botticelli was in Venice. Did I say Venice or Florence?
I don't know what you said.
Botticelli was in Florence when this happened.
And maybe we'll just be hanging more plants on the walls.
Yeah, there's a lot about shock art that comes hand in hand with censorship, so we should talk about that someday.
I can't wait to talk about censorship. I'm going to censor you right now.